No, you haven't. We've been through that before. It doesn't last. Something tremendous will happen, and you'll want to be part of it. So, Zappa says how dumb they are, and Don Preston says, but they do scream for more when we do a good show. Zappa says, they scream for more and more because they paid X amount of dollars to get in, and they want the max amount of entertainment for their money. It's got nothing whatever to do with what you play. Stick any group on there and let them play to the end of the show. So Frank's saying it's the medium is the message. He says there's no content. Doesn't matter what the content is, the kids are there so they can get in the act and yell and scream or something. The journalist says, do you have a solution to this situation? Zappa says, yeah. Holy shit, he says it right here. Yeah, I'm not going to tour anymore. Holy shit. He announced it. He doesn't say he's breaking up the band, but I'm not going to tour anymore. Then, and this was published, 2 months later after he announced it. Then the journalist says, then I asked some questions which amounted to, quote, will rock survive? Zappa says, rock, to the guy, the jazz guy, will rock survive? Zappa says, rock won't die. It will go through some changes, but it ain't going to die. They predicted too many times in the past. Remember, quote, the limbo is coming in. Rock and roll is dead, unquote. There have even been some concerted efforts to kill it. But it will survive because there will always be several very smart producers and record companies who are interested in giving people what they want instead of what they need. Ooh, he says they need something. So he goes back to describing the concert. During the concert, the Mothers play several long numbers where everybody gets a chance to blow. Since several of the players have extensive jazz backgrounds, that's Don Preston, Bunk Gardner and his brother, and Ian Underwood, their playing in this context clarifies the differences between jazz and rock improvisation. And their playing in this context clarifies the difference between jazz and rock improvisation. An essential quality of the jazz solo is the sense it conveys of forward movement through time, which is the result, I think, says the journalist, of the jazz soloist's role, in even the simplest context, establishing and revealing his identity. In the typical rock solo, this kind of forward movement rarely occurs. Instead, there is an amount of space to be decorated, with the emotional curve, in brackets, excitement to ecstasy, a foregone conclusion. That's why many jazz listeners find rock solos boring, no matter how well played. They're like someone brought up on Beethoven who listens to a raga and says, quote, I dig the rhythm, but we're going around in circles. Where's the development? Is that what a Westerner thinks of the Indian music, Roxy? We're going around in circles? See? No comment? In many rock solos, guitar solos especially, there's a theatrical relation between the player and what he's playing. And we'll do that again. In many rock solos, guitar solos especially, there's a theatrical relation between the player and what he's playing. And the most exciting parts occur when it sounds as if what he's playing has got the upper hand. The drama is that he's conjured up a screaming musical monster, supposedly, and now the beast threatens to overcome him. The excitement comes from watching him master the beast, surrender to it, or get even all together and smash or burn the instrument. When someone like Jimi Hendrix presents this sexual fantasy, it can be Wagnerian. This is what the journalist writes. And he says, the Mothers undercut this setup quite neatly. The soloists go through the outward motions of getting hot, but the precision of accent and the care they give to motivic development prevent any loss of control effect. The reaction of the audience to this was curious. Zappa would stomp off a number that had, watch out, explosion ahead, written all over it, and the people around me would murmur, yeah, and a blank look of anticipated ecstasy would settle on their faces. By the end of the piece, no explosion had occurred, and they looked vaguely bewildered, although they applauded, of course. What do you think of that, guys? Any comment, Eben?
Well, I guess I kind of sense a little bit that he didn't necessarily connect with the audience, and it's hard, I think, for creators that are ahead of their time to expect to be understood. But he was out there, and he did it, and he made such an impact, and so. I mean, that's all you can really do, is just to do it for yourself, and hopefully people will get it.
Yep. Okay. It says, you have anything to say, Roxy? Maybe Roxy's not there anymore. Seems her number is still there. Okay. The Mothers have made 6 albums, and Absolutely Free, We're Only In It for the Money, and Uncle Meat are worthy of anyone's attention. Their first album, Freak Out, is interesting, but unformed compared to the others. Mother Mania is an anthology, and Reuben and the Jets an extreme parody of 50s rock and roll. It doesn't mean much to me, since I never got to that music the first time around. So he thinks it's a parody, and not limited to that. Listening to all the albums in one sitting reveals an interesting facet of Zappa's musical procedure. In the pieces with lyrics, the often elaborate rhythmic and melodic patterns are tied directly to the words. One beat and one note to each syllable with few large melodic intervals. Let's read that again. No, I'll finish the paragraph and redo it. This effect carries over into the instrumental pieces, where the tight rhythmic melodic motifs expand and contract as if they had a life of their own. It's an airy, bracing music, and the play of intelligence in it is so prominent that one must respond in kind. I'll read that paragraph again. Listening to all the albums in one sitting reveals an interesting facet of Zappa's musical procedure. In the pieces with lyrics, the often elaborate rhythmic and melodic patterns are tied directly to the words. One beat and one note to each syllable, with few large melodic intervals. This effect carries over into the instrumental pieces, where the tight, rhythmic, melodic motifs expand and contract as if they had a life of their own. It's an airy, bracing music, and the play, I like that, airy, bracing music, and the play of intelligence in it is so prominent that one must respond in kind. Zappa thinks that Uncle Meat is, quote, the best album in terms of overall quality, but his favorite music is on Lumpy Gravy, the album where he directs a large orchestra. It's hard for me to tell why he thinks so, since what comes through is a collage of rock and classical parodies that are disconnected by any standards. What comes through is a collage of rock and classical parodies that are disconnected by any standards. Perhaps he has in mind the album Lumpy Gravy. Perhaps he has in mind the album Lumpy Gravy might have been. Perhaps he has in mind, since he says his favorite music, what it might have been, since both he and Bunk Gardner mentioned that the Los Angeles studio men on the date were unable to cope with some of the music and played without much spirit and what they did manage to record. Then it says, Frank Zappa might be described as a cultural guerrilla. He sees that the popular arts are propagandistic in the broad sense. Even when they masquerade as rebellion, they lull us into fantasy and homogenize our responses. So he infiltrates the machine and attempts to make the popular forms defeat their traditional ends. His music doesn't lull, it tries to make you think. Obviously, he's balanced on a narrow edge. On the one hand, he's faced with an audience whose need for homogeneous response is so great that they can make his creations fit their desires. On the other hand, he must in some way reach a mass audience or his efforts are useless. And of course, there's money too. He's only human. But now listen to this. But whatever the outcome, there is still the music. And if any of us are around in 20 years, I think we'll be listening to it. Well, you got that right. Now, we're going to go over to an article by David Wally. David Wally, he wrote one of the first rock biographies. It was a biography of Zappa. And I knew him at the time. And there's from November 10th, 1969. What's that? Somebody say something? From November 10th, 1969, David Wally writes an article. It says he's a music critic for the East Village Other. That means he worked for Walter Boert and Jazz and Pop magazine. This guy goes on in the 70s to have a semi-career as a Zappa expert. What did he say in 1969? Has he decided to write the book yet? I don't think so. So he's thinking. Now, he's a graduate of Yale University, someplace like that. He's a cultural historian, and he's got the guts of looking at Frank and saying, what are we going to do with this guy? So, and now he's saying this after the breakup. So David Wallace says, the mothers are dead. At least that was what the press release said a few days ago. The mothers are dead as a performing unit for a few months. But the way things look at present, they'll not be performing together except on albums. No more performances. No more fiendish Frank's mustache and scowl. Quote, laying on you some heavy blues licks, unquote. No more Jimmy Carl Black, the Indian of the group. Blowing minds. No more Ian Underwood sax solos. To me, the idea of the mothers not gigging is an unmitigated disaster, not only for the musicians, but more importantly for the audiences who will be deprived of good music. Frank's music strained one's senses. It was music that made one think beyond British blues, beyond B.B. King guitar riffs, or superstar ego-tripping and publicity-hype games. Music that made one think beyond British blues, B.B. King guitar riffs, or superstar ego-tripping and publicity-hype games. Admittedly, Frank himself had much to do with killing the group. He wanted something his audiences couldn't give him. He wanted understanding. Not that he was a freak, which he wasn't, and needed comprehension. Not that he was a freak, which he wasn't, and needed comprehension. No. Frank wanted something which was impossible to gain from his audience. The composer and a musician, not a pop performer. To be a musician in an age, or indeed a decade, which demands personalities is hard. For a generation which has been raised on hype, it was doubly hard to comprehend when a musician played music without the trimmings and the visuals which normally go with pop music. For a generation which has been raised on hype, it was doubly hard to comprehend when a musician played music without the trimmings and the visuals which normally go with pop music. The mothers had their own set of crazy visuals, but they were incidental to their music. Frank thought that if enough people saw him because he was strange, because he cursed on stage, or because in his younger days he used to slop coffee all over his instruments, people would listen to his music. Frank thought that if he did that, people would listen to his music. He was right and wrong about this approach. Apparently people came to see the mothers because of their visuals, not because of their music. People came to see a show, not to be turned on to a form which was far ahead of his time. Frank became the victim of his own outrageous behavior. He became trapped by his own gags. People listened to him for the wrong reasons. It was the hip thing to do, the hip thing to laugh at the mothers and their music. Oh yeah, Frank's a freak, and the members of his band are out of sight. Yeah, sure. He can really play those old 50s rock numbers, and with such style, too. Oh yeah, Frank Zappa, he's such a funny man. And so on. I've heard it many times. The mothers passed out of the performing era because that was the only thing that could be done. There was nothing else left. Quote, nothing to be done, unquote, like Beckett said in Waiting for Godot. I suspect that Frank as well was waiting for the mythical Godot. Though unidentified in the play, perhaps Godot represented understanding, the understanding Frank never got from the public. His public, though, expected that Frank act a part of the clown, the iconoclast. But under that facade was, and still is, a serious, dedicated, and angry composer. Zappa's music may have sounded a little cute at times and complex at other times. It was. Frank was committed, as were the mothers, not to turning people onto drugs, not to blowing people's minds with dynamite fiery blues riffs. His music was dedicated to turning you inward, to make you reflect on your own environment. Then he lists a few song titles. Plastic People, America Drinks and Goes Home, Trouble Coming Every Day, I'm Losing Status at the High School. Those were a few of his more well-known numbers. And then people used to shout out in the middle of his concerts when there was a lull, play Louie Louie. Some joke that was. Frank wanted to do something more than entertain people. He wanted to educate people's ears by not giving them what they wanted. Perhaps Frank wanted too much by wanting people to listen instead of consuming his music. Perhaps Frank wanted too much by wanting people to listen instead of consuming his music. People, because they didn't want to be bothered, saw Frank for a freak, and all they expected from him was freakiness. What they didn't get, when they didn't get that, they booed or taunted him. Frank reacted by disdaining his audiences. Continue over here. All right. Frank, where are we at? Frank reacted by disdaining his audience's sensibilities. He realized that those who went to see him weren't interested in anything more than themselves being at a Mother's concert telling their friends how strange Frank was that night, or what he said to hecklers. The show was more important than the music, the medium more important than the message. His albums were bought more for curiosity than for what they said, something to terrorize parents. When Frank did Lumpy Gravy and then Uncle Meat, perhaps people thought he had gone too far. No wisecracks, no catchy lyrics, nothing but pure music. Not electronic wah-wah freak-out electric ladybird music, but music that was better than anything being ground out by the atonal anti-masters who had infested America's music schools. Read that again. But not electronic wah-wah freak-out electric ladybird music, but music that was better than anything being ground out by the atonal anti-masters who had infested America's music schools. It was music that was so much better that it should have been played for those people. It was music that was so much better that it should have been played for those people who tyrannized their atonal knowledge over the younger, more impressionable composers who were still, unfortunately, involved in the university scene. I'll read that again. It was music that was so much better that it should have been played for those people who tyrannized their atonal knowledge over the younger, more impressionable composers who were still, unfortunately, involved in the university scene. Frank was dedicated to his music as the mothers were dedicated to playing it, burps and all. Few understood the import of his music. But perhaps this will now change, since both he and they will not be on the cultural stump anymore. Why did Frank break up the band? He was going into production of other people's records and some films he'd been working on for the past 3 years. Yes, that's the reason, the official reason why he decided to stop beating his brains out for a majority of people who refused to listen. When will they publicly perform again? The master said, quote, "It is possible that at a later date, when audiences have properly assimilated the recorded work of the group, a reformation might take place," unquote. Maybe Frank is too far ahead of his time. Maybe he should go into retirement. Then again, all great artists are way ahead of the general public. For the sake of the musical form in which Frank was working, it is hoped that he will again meet his public. Maybe then he won't be forced to play Louie Louie for 16 hours at a time to satisfy the popular notion of pop culture or pop entertainment. It is a consummation devotedly to be wished, and time will tell. So that's the author. Oop. Is that you coming back, Roxy? Have you come back to speak? Nope. Bert. No. Bart. Are you yearning to say something?
Thanks for unmuting me.
You're welcome. I don't know if Roxy's gone, but you may be subbing in for Roxy.
Yes, I caught some of that. It's interesting what Roxy's going through on this phone call, what I've heard so far. She's evoked statements from you about getting a position and your arguments with. Right. What's happening? What are you doing? And she's whether she was joking or not, she was running out of steam on things. I couldn't tell if she was picking up your traits.
You mean she
just being phatic? Yep. What were you saying?
Go ahead. To ask Bart. Or no, Bert. What do you think, Bert?
At first I thought she was being emphatic, but I thought she was at first being emphatic, but in the end, she's very serious because she kept repeating that this is her final payday.
Yeah, I've noted you and you and Roxy Bert have basically kept up with Bob for hours and hours and hours. So many shows. I've just considered these sort of late night hours, the Bert, Roxy, and Bob segment. Zappa or otherwise, but really, Titanic. The length of time you guys have put in, and have kept it going. It's 120
hours. Bart, it's
at least
119, 120 hours right now. Not at least. That's what it is. I know precisely what it is.
120 between you, Bert, and Roxy, or on this payday. Well, not on this payday, but I guess it would be between you, Bert, and Roxy.
No. This whole series, we started back in October. It was 113 hours before tonight. We may have done about 7 hours total here on the Zappa part, so that's 120 hours. Add that to 113.
Yeah, and reflecting back, I would say that it was necessary, and it's listening to all of the ionic sort of overtones with Zappa's life and career, and also that he's on your chart. It's necessary to document that, and I think you guys did a very complete job in doing that.
Yes.
You've done hundreds of hours on McLuhan. You've done a lot on probably Croker, but I don't know if you've done archives for them specifically yet. Just McLuhan and Zappa. But I can see
not Croker.
And you've done Croker.
No, we haven't done much. We haven't done a series. There's nobody who can read Croker that I could do it with.
I got you. Okay.
Well, I don't see you reading Croker.
Well, there was a lot
complex, that's for sure.
Oh yeah.
Complex.
Yeah, I mean that's just one of the.
What'd you say, Bert? There's a lot of what?
I said Croker is quite complex. I said Croker is quite complex to read.
Yeah, and there's also I'm still getting settled here, and that's why I've kind of been intermittently still on the calls. I'm physically doing work at my home here, but there are things that are on my reading list. Mark Hansen is still one of them.
Mm-hmm.
But it's I've been surprised that Bert and Roxy have been hanging in as long and as consistently as they have, just because. And maybe it's just the hour, but typically there are a lot of distractions that are pulling people away for whatever reason, jobs and so on. But they've held forth. I'm impressed.
Yeah, they did a good accomplishment.
Just jumping.
And we could do more.
Oh yeah, no, I'm just saying.
Basically, we've done.
You've done?
We've done early interviews. No, we've just gone up to 1969. I mean, we could go to the end of his career, the interviews he did in the 80s, and see if there's anything to say. But I think basically we've covered his attitude, what he was doing, and he kept that attitude most of the time. He'd do variations of his personality in different contexts through the years, but he was consistent to this stated objective that we read in the late 60s interviews.
Hey, Bob.
Whether he was a Don Quixote or not.
Bob?
I mean, he wanted to, and somebody say something?
It's Evan. I hear you.
Yeah. It was,
Evan. It's Evan.
hey, I just want to thank you so much for allowing me to powwow with your Zappa crew. I have to turn out and in, and so thank you so much, and I will see you next Saturday or Tuesday or something.
All right, great. Thanks a lot, Evan.
All right. Bye, Bert. Hi, everybody.
Take care, Evan.
Bye, Evan.
Okay, bye.
Bye. Yeah, the Don Quixote of Frank. He somehow, like he says, I'm not interested in entertainment, I'm into music. Well, he seems to have an expanded idea of what music is. He's into using environments to create altered perspectives. And it was seen as him doing music, but maybe his idea about what he was doing is the deeper part.
Yeah, no, I liked it.
He would bother people. People wouldn't know what to make of what he's doing. Okay, he's talking about this and that, do that for 18 months, and then suddenly he's doing something completely different.
Right,
and
he's going
maybe
from
contradicting what he said he was going to do.
Yeah, which is a very McLuhan-esque. It's very Dobbsian. It's very ionic.
Yeah, that's right.
And also,
the Black
I like
Caucus.
The Black Caucus. Bob is the figurehead. If there are any caucuses here, I guess you're still the figurehead, whatever it is. So if there's the ET caucus, you're going to be the figurehead of that too. So,
yeah.
He's also president of the student council. He's also
that's great.
In the global high
I've
school.
always the what's that?
In the global high school.
In the global high school, yeah. Oh, we've advanced because we were elementary school age before. Well, I always liked Zappa's statement about that he did something serious that he didn't take seriously or something to that effect. Was that his statement?
Right. Yeah, he said people can't understand how you can seriously do something you don't take serious.
Right. which is a great sort of ionic phrase in and of itself.
Yeah.
But you...
I think I have it right in this file folder. Might have the exact statement in this file folder here. Did we finish? So David Wally, he's upset that Zappa has stopped playing, and Wally's going to go on and write a book about Zappa. Wally passed away a few years ago. He had a falling out with Frank, which really upset him. I was in the middle of that. I read the manuscript before it was published in New York. That was at the time 200 Motels came out in November 1971. And I was a confidant to Dave Wally while he commiserated about his falling out with Frank. And then I would talk to Frank about it. So I was go-between. I didn't try to ameliorate it. I just heard their different views. Okay, so I'm looking for the LA Free Press interview so we can read exactly what he said. Just a second.
Around what year?
Oh, this is August 69. I know the exact date of the interview. August 69 in the Los Angeles Free Press, I think it was called. Unfortunately, I'm not seeing it. I've got to July, September. I thought I saw it the other day. There's that.
So you said something that Zappa made a statement. You said it maybe a few minutes ago that he said something about crowds. He didn't like crowds or the masses, something to that effect.
No, the journalist said that, and that's not necessarily true. I mean, Frank enjoyed doing what he was doing. Can't say he didn't like the masses.
Right, he was entertaining them. I'm trying to parse out what he's saying and what's being attributed to him.
I'm looking at, I think I'm getting close to the article.
Dave Wally had some interesting observations
of
Frank in that article you just read.
Yes. He was starting to think it through about what he would say. Look at this. And, Roxy went and saw Pauline Oliveros yesterday. So, the Zappa, it's date Los Angeles Free Press. Looking for the date.
Pauline was born in Houston, Texas.
Is that where you are right now?
Yes. Well, I'm in Spring, which is just in a suburb.
Right. I'm looking for the date. Doesn't show the date. What? Well, I have an advertisement from the paper, but I don't know if it's the same day as the interview. The advertisement says June 20th, 69. So here's how the interview starts. Paul Eberle is the journalist. So Zappa goes, "What do you want to talk about?" Paul, "I'd like to confine it strictly to music and just talk about that. I'm not particularly interested in your high school basketball coach and all that crap." Zappa says, "Good." Paul, "I just heard your new album, Uncle Meat, and some of it sounds like some of the new Polish music. And some of it sounds like Zap Comics," that's R. Crumb's Zap Comics, "set to music." Frank says, "I can dig it. I can dig it." Paul says, he says, "And in a lot of it, there's obviously serious intent, despite sounding like Zap Comics or Polish music." And Zappa says, "It's all serious intent. I seriously intended to make that album sound exactly the way it sounds. And some people can't understand that you can seriously want to do something that's not serious." So I always say it's seriously do something. He says that you can seriously want to do something that's not serious. And some people can't understand that you can seriously want to do something that's not serious. So Paul says, "They think the two have to be done separately, like Spike Jones made some funny records and others that were just chiffon music." Zappa says, "What we do and have from the very beginning is concept art, Like the real artistic merit of what we do does not necessarily exist on the disc itself. It's like different tones. I tried to explain this concept in a lecture I gave to a group of radio broadcasters. Do you know Pauline Oliveira's piece on the Argosy label? She's made a piece of music on which the sounds are generated this way. Two sounds, one below the audible range of hearing and one above the audible range of hearing. And from them are produced, quote, difference tones." Paul says, "Are they audible?" Zappa says, "Yeah, they're quite audible, but they happen in between the two real things. So if you vary those two tones slightly, all this mass in between shifts. And so she created a piece where the tones are very slightly." What?
I'm just laughing at that. I like that statement. I like that statement.
So if
it's
you
above
vary
and
those
below.
This
one?
Go
ahead. Yeah.
So if you vary those two tones slightly, all this mass in between shifts. Is that the sentence?
Yeah, you're playing outside of the range of human hearing, but if you distort those tones, then it becomes what was the last sentence? The last.
Two sounds, one below the audible range of hearing and one above. Oh, here's Roxy. How you doing, Roxy?
Hey.
Go ahead.
Yes, Colonel Bert was interested in how technology has expanded our perception to hear with or be aware of much more frequencies that we will be able to hear without these aids. So that's one of the things she was always interested in experimenting with, how to expand our hearing capabilities, and that's how she developed this idea of quantum hearing.
Oh.
Because with technology we can be aware of many aspects of sound that maybe without the visualization, for example, of waveforms and other sound parameters, we will not be able to distinguish or to somehow modify them.
So what Zappa's saying here in 69, 47 years later, she's still working on this idea.
Yes,
right?
How the human perception and cognitive abilities have been expanded by technology. And
well, that's ionic, and that's what McLuhan says. So she's not against technology.
Oh. No, I think she explores all types of sound, acoustic and synthetic.
Now, did she say any of this when you saw her yesterday, or she just got you into the meditation and talked about how to do that?
No. No, I read before this. She had quantum hearing. But through music, one of her interests is how somehow sound connects you to what she thinks is spiritual.
Yeah, she's reaching for, but that's not
fossil.
Yes, because she thinks creation and music making is a way to connect with this thing people outside the ionic ideas called spirit. Like some type of connection with the thingness. And she has been interested in many aspects of sound, how sound creates community, how sound heals, and how we perceive, for example, a space with sound, for example, the Doppler effect or stereo, or how we locate sounds. Help us understand our environment. It's part of not only the acoustic space, but also the visual space in her view.
So that statement about her taking sounds above and below the human range of hearing and then distorting them and the effects that are created by that, there's something like a pattern that could be there, like something in the gap, or there's something interesting. There's something interesting about that notion, but it seems like it could be a pattern that's applied to something here.
Yes, because another thing is how, for example, whales or communicate in big distances, and for example, or this galaxy of water through sounds, like the bats, they emit this wonderful sound thing, and they feel reflections of food, some types of fishes or things that are in the water. That, I mean, the singing is not only aesthetic, but has other functions in how they interact with the environment. She somehow thought a bit.
Roxy, your phone's sort of breaking up there.
Hey, Roxy, let me call you. I'll bring you on the line so it'll be clearer. Okay? So you can get off the computer or whatever you're on, and I'll just flash you in, okay? Okay? Oh, yes, she went off. Okay. I'll be back in a minute, guys.
Okay.
All right. Hey,
Entertain the
Bart.
Bart
Yes.
or Bert.
We'll entertain each other.
Bart, did you get to hear? Did you get to hear it? Yeah. Did you hear Brian's engagement with Ion last week with the planet and the sun?
Oh yeah, I heard all of it. Yep. Yeah. So Brian went through that whole struggle
quite
about. Oh, go ahead.
No, go ahead. No, it's just interesting what Ion told him about, because he admitted that we can look at it, our existence, as it's a flat plane with a sphere over us, like a dome, but then the sun is not within or without. And that made me think that all the space pictures you ever see, it's always dark. You never see the sun when they have pictures from outer space. Have you ever noticed that? Or have you ever seen the sun, like from the space station or any type of... They never show the sun when they're in outer space. And when Ion said that, that made me think of that last week when he was speaking with Brian.
They've got the NASA telescopes pointed at it, but I guess maybe if you're outside of the atmosphere, that you might be in danger of wrecking your equipment if you're shooting it straight at the sun. Who knows? Because they've got I'm sure they have.
Well, but you don't see the light. You don't really see the light. I mean, if you look at how the sun illuminates our planet, when they have outer space, I mean, flying by, you don't really see the beam of light like what we see. And that just made me think of what Ion told Brian. But it also made me think that Ion told me there were 8 suns.
Yes, but, good luck finding those. But I like it. Ion did say that once...
Go ahead.
Okay, go ahead. They're back.
Yeah, Roxy's back, and she was saying, she thought we were on the air, she was saying something about singing. Roxy, knowing what you are going to say.
The singing of the whales, that they just don't sing like us for fun or for aesthetic reasons, but to relate to their environment. And they communicate not only between them, but with the waves and the vibration with other things through the water. So I like that idea. And Pauline Oliveros has also studied the brain and hearing. And we know that we use only a part of our brain, very small part of our brain, and she wonders how technology is going to help us expand evolve in a way that we could use all our cognitive and perceptual capabilities, all of our brain.
Yeah.
Because there are many techniques, like the overtone technique, that are used by the Siberian and other types of techniques of the use of voice or singing, or this thing they do in the mountains.
Like the Tibetans,
It's like la 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 la. No.
Oh, yodeling.
Oh, like in the Tyrol. Yes.
Okay.
Yeah,
Okay. Yep.
I mean, if we all could sing, there is a lot of things we can do with our body as an instrument. And she thinks it's something we have to develop to be somehow fully evolved. And I think that has to do with what Ian is saying.
Did you say to be free of love or full of love? I misheard that?
Fully evolved.
Fully evolved. Okay. Actually, Bob made a good point. It is, the response to her query is really fa sol la, because that's working on the ascended level. Whatever.
Yes, and she has also looked into cymatics and how sound, for example, can interact with particles such as electrons, and of course there is a quantum hearing. There are vibration and frequencies affecting the molecules, the particles, the cells, and we're becoming more aware of those things also with the help of technology.
But I wonder. I think Ion
see those things or measure.
Has addressed like the solfeggio frequencies. Am I saying that right?
I
Yes.
didn't hear.
You are.
Okay, solfeggio frequencies are...
Frequencies, sorry?
It's solfeggio, SOLFEGGIO. And it says, the description here is the solfeggio frequencies make up the ancient six-tone scale thought to have been used in sacred music, including the beautiful and well-known Gregorian chants. The chants and their special tones were believed to impart spiritual blessings when sung in harmony. Each solfeggio tone is comprised of a frequency required to balance your energy and keep your body, mind, and spirit in perfect harmony. But I think that Ion's sort of discounted these binaural beats, or sort of using, at least up to this point, technology in that way to alter maybe your physiology, or you can help me, Bob or Bert, if you recall that.
Talk about chips or like implants that will make you, for example, have perfect pitch or play an instrument or something like that. They think someday we will be able to download this type of things, and like a program information.
Well,
and then like an app.
I don't. That's a good question. I would say anything that's possible in.
Isn't that what the drops do? Didn't Ion say that fossil law was in the RNA drops?
Well, I think.
I thought I heard that.
I think there are going to be these both things being developed, both the cyborgs and the ionic technologies perfecting. I mean, if we can use our brain as it is supposed to be, fully on with the hypothalamus on, that there is a lot of art which has the form of a brain, and the part of the hypothalamus is light or is the eye of the providence, and it's really showing that there is this awareness about the brain and this turning the hypothalamus on that is going to change our perception. It's going to enhance, like, I think we're going to be able to hear with the whole skin, for example.
Is that something you heard Ian say?
Like,
Because it sounds like you mean the cells are picking up frequencies or tones, and
yes,
but you're saying
he's saying a lot about the magnetism and the frequencies, and that's how cells communicate with electric impulses, magnetism, and chemistry. And this, I suppose there have been some frequencies that are going to be somehow amplified so that we can really tune into them. And this is going to morph the perfect cells. I think that's one of the things that is happening besides the chemistry, because Ion is talking so much about the frequency. But maybe I should ask him.
Yeah, they.
Yes, I really like the concept of Pauline Oliveira about this quantum hearing at the cellular level, because for me it sounds very ionic.
Yeah, and I was trying to get a pattern from her pulling from above and below the human range of hearing, and then like rubbing those things together and having effects come from that. It's almost like the non-physical of Ion rubbing with our own non-physical and creating overtones or tones from that.
It's a good pattern.
But on one level...
Because it's amazing. We don't even really know what the energy is, what matter is, really. There are no real definitions of many things. It's all very blurry.
Well,
Ion says we don't even know how these things work, but
they work.
It's a fact that we have the impression things are solid, but all is fata morgana, all is illusion.
Yeah, Bert had just mentioned the whole struggle that Brian went through I think it was the last call with Ion about the Earth being flat. And he was getting fired up about the Earth being flat and asking if there was even a ball at all or what it was we were on. And I think after several minutes of him going back and forth with Ion in this sort of struggle, he sort of loses it. Says, "Well, now I don't know where the hell I am." He's even more lost than he started. And then Bob sort of interjected that you have to let go of your visual bias. You have to stop worried about the visual, and move into your tactile, into the interval. So it's basically it all falls back. It all falls back to what you see is not real and what you can't see is real.
Yes, but I was saying that too.
Yeah.
I think last two Paydays when he was saying we have telescopes, and all of a sudden there is no Pluto and there is a new planet. Explain me that. So this is the type of things that he says shouldn't be but are. And
right, the ninth planet.
I suppose all these things maybe where or are. Like the Earth is flat, and all these models
Yeah.
have been somehow created and
Now the veil is
and maybe, like Ian said, as we read the story, we are changing the vanishing point, but maybe things were really different before. Like when he says there was no America, America came out from something, appeared, a new world. That's the type of thing that might seem illogical, but that's the way I suppose it really is.
Ion defined a planet as a celestial body held to influence the fate of human beings, and then says you can loop into or without of it, meaning a planet, but without gravity, which is fixing to change, you're not going to recognize the planets anyway. So that's when they said that Brian was very apropos to question the validity of all these things, the time-space fields and so on. So our perceptions are going to change.
Yeah.
Well, obviously.
Yes, and
that's
today
tied in. I saw that's
that it's about connecting frequencies. So the connecting of the worlds of the different. It has to do with this connection of frequencies.
I think there was, there's also, is it a connection or is it like an acclamation? Because Ion's made statements to the effect that there are new frequencies coming into the planet or over the planet or however you want to say that, and that we're taking the completement formulas and sort of and engaging Iondom as a way to become acclimated to those frequencies that are sort of flooding, or like the two universes smashing together.
Yes, because it's the thing with the castles and many constructions and streets.
Right,
and
that's what I was going to say.
It's all interconnected. And with Google, you can connect like Chambord with Egypt and with this and that and that. And so it's this weird net of things that are connected. And for example, the cathedrals were really made to amplify, to resonate. And I suppose all these ascended people were trying to reconnect with the non-physical through these constructions, with these frequencies, and maybe they thought the wine was what the RNA drops are, because they are all into wine, and because of the Bible. That's the blood.
Yeah, that's trying to connect. It's just going through the it's remembrance. It's remembering, but it's you're not able to really connect until you get here.
That was the porn.
It was the porn, yeah.
That was the
You'll be drunk on it.
Of all the mass and the transmutation and all this is the form of the RNA drops of the completion.
It's the ascension, the connection,
the real transmutation of the blood. Yes, and for example, for me it was a big epiphany to see that if you see the Nile Delta, it's like a brain, and the Nile is like the spine.
What was the first? What was the
what
first?
Ion is saying about the fractals.
Nile Delta.
Yeah, the Nile.
The Nile Delta, Bart.
Yeah.
The Nile Delta.
The Nile. Egypt. The river.
It also looks like a open lotus, and that has been inserted in many works of art. So it's like really amazing, and many people that have seen this pattern say, well, it must be aliens coming and telling this artist, or because they don't have telescope, how could they know this? And I suppose it's just that there is no time, and there is all this interaction going on, and that will explain all these weird anomalies and all these inceptions of things being in the cosmos, like this same pattern of the Nile is in the Orion constellation.
Oh, that's what they said?
So it's like...
That's what Ion said, or that's what someone else said?
Yes. No,
Ion said
many
that.
people have seen this pattern.
Okay. Yeah, and Ion made a statement, too, about...
Did Ion also say that... Did Ion also say that the Nile would reverse just like the Mississippi? That I've always heard him say that the Mississippi would reverse its course and flow, but didn't they earlier say that the Nile would also reverse its flow?
I don't remember hearing that.
I'm not sure, but...
Oh, okay.
It's very interesting, too, that there are many cities in America that sort of reflect Egypt, the names and
Memphis.
all these areas. And also the Mount Sinai is like what Ion logo is. This is like a pyramid, and then the fire on top that was talking to Moses. And I think...
Oh, yeah, there's definitely that going on. The Moses scenario, the Moses pattern. And the Sherman on the Mount.
Yeah, there is a German mathematician and chemist, Schwaller de Lubix. He studied the Temple of Man like for 15 years as a scientist, and he discovered that all the proportions of the temple are the proportions of the human body, and how the different types of stylization of the figures correspond to specific mathematical measurements, like the golden mean and the pi. And this pattern is repeated in all major buildings, all major cathedrals, and also in the Capitol in Washington.
The pattern relating
is that the Temple of Luxor?
So
is that Luxor?
Yeah.
Temple of Luxor?
Yeah,
what
and Schroeder de Lubix was not like a New Age or anything. He was a scientist, a real scientist, and he was studying that for 15 years, and he has done very interesting studies on that. And then from that, many people have seen this pattern, for example, repeating also in Paris, in Versailles, and in the Piazza de San Pietro in Rome.
Relating these structures to the human body.
The human body, which is the golden mean. Yeah. And also the golden mean has to do with the scales and the frequencies. So there is a correspondence of these proportions and these frequencies in
in the visual and in the acoustic. And for example, the Vedas had also this representation of the Om, which is the yantra. Mantra was the sound, and yantra is like the visual representation of that sound. And with the new things we have to visualize frequencies and sound, like cymatics, they found out that when they sing the Om, this figure appears. And they go like, how did they knew that? How could they create that without the technology? But yeah, that's the thing. There is no time, and these things might come from the now or from who knows. I don't even know anymore how to say it.
Stop there. Just stop there. That's all you got to say.
Because there is not the future or the past, but
I don't even know. Well, with what we realized,
that's where we take Bob's position. We know we don't know.
Yeah. It's what we're realizing. It's the sounds that we don't hear that are affecting us. The tones that we don't hear.
Yes, and for example, when Zappa talks about Pauline Oliveros saying these things about the frequencies and how this interaction between what we don't hear and what we hear creates some type of anomaly that we will usually not see. I mean, he shows he has an awareness of all these things. And for example, in Mexico, there are many acoustic phenomena in the all ruins and all the Maya ruins. But this hasn't been really researched. But it's amazing. For example, in Chichen Itza, the courtyard where they will play ball, it was not football, but something else. Like, you can stand on one side and hear to the people talking, like, even if they speak like very quietly, you hear everything on the other side, and it's in the open. And there are also many things. For example, in Uxmal, there is a courtyard. If people applaud, it sounds like rain, and it has 9 echoes. And like this, there are many types of acoustic effects in not only in Mexico but in many ancient constructions. And
yeah,
I mean, to do this type of acoustic spaces, I mean, it's like amazing. How did they do it? How did they know?
They have a courtyard in Machu Picchu where there's a block of rocks where you can whisper, and the people on the other side of the wall could hear you if you whisper into the wall of this rock in Machu Picchu. So it's like what you were saying, Roxana, about the acoustic aspect.
Everywhere, and
yeah.
My explanation is that somehow the people that did that connected to the non-physical, or there is this interaction with people from all times. That is not time, but.
Well, and you have to consider because there is no time. Those structures. Say that again? The aliens are coming?
Yeah, because many end up saying the aliens did that, but it was
if you take time out, then the structures that they're discovering have been placed there, and they might not have been. They don't know how they're supposed to be utilized. Like, it's almost like we'll realize how they come into utilization. Our realization of how to utilize them is coming. It's not, where we are now. We probably are misinterpreting what those structures are for. Just like the pyramids, Ian said about the pyramids and structures that keep appearing that, it's almost impossible for scientists or archaeologists rather to have overlooked these structures. They just seem to find them, and it's like they won't come into. I'm trying to phrase this right. It's like we won't know how to use them until we come to some certain experience of them. Like the pyramids have yet to be. They are, but they're serving a purpose that is yet to be, basically. So it's just another way to think of them. If you just picture them as deposited there from our future into our past, and they have yet to become, it gives you a different perspective on the structures.
Why can't we say there is no space?
Oh, sure. There's no gravity. There's no space.
Spaced.
What was your statement?
Yeah. When we say there is no time, are we including space?
Ian did say that a while ago, early on. There's no distance. There's no separation.
Yeah.
Because if you thought of a distance between here and some other distant galaxy, you've created a separation or an impediment or a limitation.
Yeah.
So all that stuff, obviously all that stuff would go out the window. It constantly gets reset or washed away. That's sort of the fun part of interacting here is that.
Another aspect of sorry, and I was thinking another aspect of listening is that we can have the possibility of like focusing in something, like somebody's speaking and there is the environment noise, but we are hearing the person, and we somehow don't pay attention what's going on behind. But we can also develop this type of listening in which we can hear to more than one discourse. It can be speech, it can be music, it can be noises in the environment. And maybe that links in how we can be in two different places or in two different worlds. But I don't know. I just...
Well, you mean that we're engaged in all sorts of realities, but we're only sort of picking up this one? Like
Yes,
we're
I'm
focusing on.
just comparing it to listening.
Yeah.
You can focus in only one thing, but there are many things going on at the same time. So all these frequencies, maybe when we are able to connect to that frequency, then you just teletransport somewhere else, or even if you are in the same place, you sort of are in another world.
Ian did say that about.
Hey, Guy.
Yeah.
Yeah, feature, yeah. Ian did say what?
Oh, I was going to say Ian did use a sort of a radio tuning analogy with ESP or with picking up thoughts. Communicating that way.
I found another article I found another article by Miles, and look at the title. You guys anticipated this. It says Alchemy, Hagiography. That's sort of like worship of saints, right? Alchemy, Hagiography, and Hieroglyphics versus the teenage American archetypal theme. How's that for a bunch of words we've been talking around?
Yeah, it sounds like us.
Yeah. Alchemy, Hagiography, and Hieroglyphics versus the teenage American archetypal theme. And this is an article by Miles. So he wrote this 1970, 40 years before he got mad at Frank, or 35 years. So I'd like to read this. You guys can keep talking until you exhaust your ideas. But I'm waiting at the end of the discussion to read this.
Well, I wanted to say this. Ion said that it wasn't turning up the volume to be able to hear these other, to be able to engage people with ESP or pick up thoughts, or in that instance, it was a matter of, because if you don't have a station, you can turn the volume up and you're just going to hear static. So it was a matter of just tuning it to pick up the frequency or whatever word you want to use. And then once you've done that, then you can play with the volume. But it was a matter of tuning and not the volume. So it's a matter of, it's probably just...
for example, Paulina Liberas developed this quantum listening because she was into meditation. She's super groovy, super cool. But she said she noticed when she taped the environment, when she released into the tape, she will hear much more sounds. The microphone was picking much more sounds that she heard when she was live recording. And she's sort of aware as a musician what's going on, but she was always surprised that there was so much more. And so she started to develop this type of awareness of listening to everything in the environment. Because
that's
we somehow see but not see and hear but not hear. And that's what she means with the quantum listening, that we can like sort of expand our experience in listening.
That's kind of like the chip body picks up, or the digital body picks up more than we perceive. And like a visual example would be being able to see orbs. You snap orbs with your digital camera that you didn't see with your naked eye, but that's a perception that Ion says. I think that they said something like there's something that's already there before you see the orbs on the camera. There's something in your being that has allowed for that. So it's an easy logical progression to then go from being in that space and realizing that to being able to see them with your naked eyes. So there's something analogous there. or there may be.
For example, another very interesting idea, I think, is her girlfriend. She is called Ione, the girlfriend from Pauline Oliveira.
Okay, Pauline Oliveira.
They start doing poetry and music and meditations and some type of other type of, we could say, concerts, workshops, that in which you were supposed to develop the ability to hear in your dreams and like to listen to your environment 24 hours non-stop. And I found that somehow very interesting.
It sounds...
You don't turn off.
It sounds fun, but I'm thinking that the no action and no attention required. It's almost like if you're trying to put effort towards something, you're actually pushing that thing away. So it's like a catch-22. You're aware of something, and then you're trying to move toward it. But as you move toward it, you end up sort of pushing the experience away.
Yes, but I think it's interesting that with the electronic environment, she was turned on to try to expand these boundaries of hearing, of perception.
Yeah.
And I think that was what Zappa will find also interesting in Pauline Oliveira.
Right, not to limit your notion of what you hear. She's encouraging just more awareness. Sonic awareness, I'm seeing here she called it.
Yes, but I suppose that it's also important to develop this type of new song, which is speech. We also need to learn to listen. And I mean to explore speech as music and to speak as a composer or a musician will be expressing with his instrument.
I wonder what Pauline would say if she ever stood in a fa sol la circle.
With words. I suppose she should know, because she has really studied many things.
I guess, but she has to hear. It'd be good for her to hear Ion's take on the fa sol la. What it actually does. It's interesting that you have this vocal music that becomes this. I don't know where fa sol la originated back in the 18th century or 19th century. Is that accurate? But it's interesting how you have these centuries of sound, and then what ends up being ionic is and actually works is, aside from Vestal Goodman, is this music, this vocal music that was made by people in these small sort of communities in the 17th or 18th century, and that becomes something that's very affecting, like an ascended sort of experience, sound. That before and
it's like a surround experience. Sound is coming from all directions, and the one conducting, and everybody has to conduct and be there, very democratic, also children or whatever. Everybody has to conduct, and the person in the middle conducting can say the speed of maybe faster or lower or whatever, but you get to be massaged by everybody around you.
Right. But it's that particular kind of music. It's not.
That would be very nice.
It's not the Gregorian chants. It's not solfeggio frequencies. It's not binaural beats. It ends up being what ends up being the most affecting is the fa sol la, which is just people who are not usually. I guess you could call them just sort of untrained, musicians who don't have a technical or scientific background, who are just getting together to sing these hymns, and they're actually producing what it is that all these people with these technologies have been trying to achieve some way, one way or another.
Yes, that's the connecting with the non-physical, that they somehow still
just make happen. But they're not trying to do that per se. They're doing something else, but it happens. It's interesting.
Maybe it's their joy, their love, their force field. Like they're really into creating a force field.
Right? Because you don't usually have...
That should make Ion react.
You don't have angry, pissed off people in a circle singing to each other. There's something that...
only force field.
Yeah, there's something that's very peculiar about that that singing, because it must be the involvement there. It's almost like they're there in the moment singing these verses, and it's like kind of like angel talk in the sense that they're not. One would think that they're not thinking about their grocery lists or what chores they have to do. They're just really intoning there, and they don't even have to be good singers. It's just something special happens.
There must be some of chemistry also being produced, like with coitus. There must be some type of chemistry going on in the brain, like when everybody's happy and loving and singing.
Euphoria, maybe.
And,
or maybe they're not experiencing anything at all.
The chemistry and the frequency. That's the thing.
It could be they're not doing anything at all.
I don't like about this fasola.
It could just be they're just making the tones, and they're not thinking or trying to do anything except for just. It's almost like a Zen, letting everything go and just making the sounds.
So what benefit do these people get from the fossil law?
Because, for example, also Paulino Oliveros talks about the quantum field among particles, because she says the particles have like a force field, like an aura, like like the all-seeing eye that has this glory around it. Is this force field that somehow interacts with the other particles, and it's somehow transmitted from one particle to the other. So she gets into this type of explanation of how she thinks sound affects you at this quantum level, and how you actually hear at the quantum level too. Your particles.
Your cells pick up the quantum level. Oh yeah, the tachyonic. Your cells are already
force field.
your cell tachyonically, you're already you're already in a place of all sounds and all music and all tones and these can be considered maybe just degradations.
Ion has said that fossil law.
What's that, Bert?
Oh, I could not hear.
I asked Ion about fossil law and the ethers, and Ion told me that fossil law is a way to unlock the ethers. The airs, the airs.
Yes, and Brian, Ion has said that the person who stands in the middle of that fossil law circle, they end up having their body benefits from that. Their physiology benefits from it. It makes their cells respond in a way that almost like RNA drops do.
So in other words, if you don't have the RNA drops, just engage in fossil law?
You can. That's what it kind of sounded like. Or just get a lot of Vestal and just down, mainline Vestal or.
Yeah, I think I'll just take the drops myself. I don't know.
Yeah, there's definitely if you hear the fossil law, you definitely feel something in those songs. Like they're very raw and very powerful.
Yeah.
So I think that's the non-physical part of me that's picking up on what's being laid down there.
Have you ever tried it, Bart? Have you ever tried to sing it?
No.
Try that.
Just being there has got to, if it's that powerful, just listening to audio, just being there has got to be completely, sort of, I don't know, ethereal experience or physical experience or visceral, maybe visceral.
Let's bring it back to Zappa. It's pretty interesting that Pauline was an influence, Pauline Oliveros, on Zappa, 50 years ago. And then Roxy went and experienced Pauline yesterday, 50 years later.
Yes.
Yes, I wanted actually to make an interview with her, but she didn't answer, and I didn't want to bother her because she's like an older lady, but she's quite cool. But
how does she express her coolness, Roxy? You say she's cool. How does she do that?
Well, she's like relaxed and smiling.
Oh, she's like me.
Really,
she's like me.
Force field of a matrix of pure love.
Well, she's 83. She's 10 years younger than me. All right.
You look younger.
Yes, I do look younger. And
because I wanted to make this interview, what I might do is just send her the questions and maybe she'll answer.
Right.
But I was reading about her ideas of quantum hearing and how she studied the particles and the force fields to understand the different levels in which sound is affecting your environment, matter, and she saw how cymatics is like there is a chaos of particles, and with the frequencies, order comes like a form, a composition of in the matter is morphed into a pattern, and so she can imagine that in particles in the environment, in you, particles have this charge of this force field, and this interaction that can be affected by frequencies, by the music, by the fasola, by the ion, the non-physical, who knows. These particles can be transformed, changed, moved, they can change their charge, they can bond, and I mean, technology helps us see these things and to prove that sound is morphing matter and affecting the force fields and how these things bond together and all these things. So,
did you, Roxy, did you notice me talking about eye and ear? That's eye and ear with Ion last week. I played last week where the senses come in. And there's more than senses, but the eye, arguing over the tonality or the matter is arguing over the eye versus the ear.
Yes, because I mean, in science and technology, we still have these words and these visuals to explain this, but Zion has to come and really explain it with more detail, what's really going on between the particles and the force fields and the bondings and the
no
morphing,
time.
the cymatics.
It says here in the Wikipedia, Pauline Oliveros is a member of Avatar Orchestra Metaverse, a global collaboration of composers, artists, and musicians that approaches the virtual reality platform called Second Life as an instrument itself. So she's playing, an aspect of the Android meme. It shows her being not cut off from the present. She's engaging Second Life. We all know what Second Life is, right? Right?
We know?
Yeah, do you know
Yes.
Do you know what Second Life is?
No.
Second Life is a virtual, it's a computerized village and anything else there that people live on. They do business on there. They make a lot of money or they lose money. It's an environment of people acting out their human behaviors by clicking. Clicking, and engaging. It's called Second Life. And she's participating with musicians. That was partly what your friends in Mexico, your musician friends, suggested we do something like that with them. Remember? Get into some space and do it?
Yes, like be virtual and interact.
Right. Now, we're doing it, but I don't know if I'd do much if it was instruments and they wanted a voice. I don't like saying ideas, just throwing them out like that. So I don't know if I have a role in there. But you never got back to them, and they never pursued it.
No.
Maybe you could go and join maybe you could join Pauline Oliveros' place.
Universe of virtual force fields.
But it would be very interesting to have her talk to Ion about Fa Sol La, to see what Pauline would make of that. Because it sounds like she's describing what the Fa Sol La experience is, reputed to be. But don't let me bother you. Carry on, folks.
No, but she has very interesting ideas because she says, like the space created by people making music or interacting, talking, or is not only affected by the people making the music or talking, but also by the people listening. And it's similar to what you say, that the people that are in the cult somehow affect also the responses of Ion.
Ion.
Yeah, that thing.
That thing. Countdown. It'll be here in 4.5 hours. 3.5 hours. We will have a return engagement with the Hulk known as Ion. Ion.
Yes, so somehow the idea that or perception affects the environment is something I find interesting. Just by seeing something or listening to something, you're affecting also the force field, the charges,
well, apparently a baby,
the bondings.
Right. Apparently a baby sees a blur, and then something starts to bring the objects out of the blur so they get to what people see. That's a strange process. But I shouldn't engage the idea it's strange. Quite normal. So we just say there are no anomalies?
Well, you mean
there are no anomalies?
Sound and turning,
right?
Taking sound and turning it into light?
Brian.
Yeah, Bob.
Listen, and I think what are really particles? Is particle a type of light?
I was watching a video where a guy was shooting sound waves into glass and water, and it produces a little tiny ball of light, which is exactly how the stars are created in the firmament, in the dome.
Are you professing scientific knowledge, Brian?
I'm just stating what I see. What I see and what I heard. I don't know nothing, Bart. I know nothing.
That's right. That's the smartest thing I ever heard Brian say. Here on my birthday.
But what I would say is that this thing they call NASA is nothing but a propaganda.
There are no birthdays. What are you talking about?
There are no fucking things. And there are no fucking things. Brian, there's fucking
no
things.
Time. What
there's no fucking thing.
There's only fucking.
Go ahead, Brian, with your Kmart Woolworth version of coitus. Let's hear it.
Kmart Woolworth version of coitus, huh?
Carry on. You were saying something.
No, I was just I just made a comment about NASA. Yeah. Everybody's bringing up NASA stuff. I said NASA. All NASA does is lie. They lie all the time. They lie about everything. Even when the truth would serve them well, they lie. They're nothing but a propaganda machine to keep everybody dumbed down and away from God. They want to keep you from your ascension that is supposed to be this paramount thing that we're getting to.
We've got to
that's right. Let's get it stirred up.
We don't want no Ezekiel propagandist here. Okay.
Oh,
but hey, Brian, how do we know, Brian? How do we know that
what?
fucking NASA doesn't have a bunch of fucking aliens with machine guns on the executive, and it's like being hijacked by terrorists, and they have to lie? How do you know that? They have a little sympathy for the boys. They probably have aliens.
No, I have no.
With knives in their back.
And for what? Well, it'd be for the same. Wouldn't it be for the same purpose? Wouldn't it be for the same purpose if you look what NASA, the fucking filth and the lies and deceptions that they put out? Isn't there a purpose to it? And the purpose is to keep all the little men from ascension.
You have to get in one of their rockets. You have to get one of their rockets to see God.
Oh, that's a good point. Have you ever watched? Google all the rocket launches, like the shuttle launches and all of them. And I always had this question as why they did it. And now I know why they do it, is because there's a fucking dome over the Earth. But you look at the rocket launches, right? They launch, right? They take off, and they're going straight up. And then it ain't very long, and all of a sudden they start arcing to the right or left. And then the next thing you know, you're watching it, and next thing you know, the rocket is literally flying parallel to the ground. I'm like, well, what the fuck is that all about? Why don't they just go fucking straight up? Isn't that the shortest distance to space is straight up?
Damn.
You watch every rocket launch, every one, and you'll see that they go up and then they start arcing. And then the next thing you know, they're jetting out there, but the fucking rocket is parallel with the fucking ground. I'm like, what the hell's going on here?
They're trying to get around American Airlines flights.
Oh, so, yeah.
They've been redirected.
Okay, I muted Brian. We're discussing Zappa. We're not going to get discussed by Brian's finger up the asshole issues that he creates for himself, and then fucking we have to listen to his vomit. Now, I have nothing against Brian, but we're not getting off topic. Is the core staff with me on this point?
Oh, I'm with you. We can continue on Zappa. I just enjoy the
Yes, I want to read this article.
Yep.
We were doing Miles earlier. Yeah, And let's see what he does with alchemy, hagiography, and hieroglyphics. I mean, you can't get better than that. It's related to Egypt and everything. Versus archetypal theme would be the TV landscape. So alchemy, hagiography, and hieroglyphics would be maybe the astral body versus the TV body here. So I don't think it's that long, but I remember reading this, back in the early 70s. And this is by Barry Miles, and he totally into Frank at this point. And he's going to get a bit disillusioned. So Miles says, Frank Zappa is chief mother on the Hollywood hagiography. He's saying he's a big deal in Hollywood industry. Frank Zappa is chief mother on the Hollywood hagiography, the conscience of the university. The conscience of the industry, the essence of West Coast pop, a rare fusion of the energies, creativity, and ideas that make up the big beat which lives on. The fusion of the energies, creativity, and ideas. The conscience of the industry, the essence of West Coast pop. Plotting in his cell, a crazed Artephius, Artephius. Anybody want to care to look that up as we go along here? A crazed Artephius. Zappa preserves this vital energy. Well, we're going to have to look up Artephius, right?
I'm looking it up.
Must be a particular. Okay, you look it up faster than me. Yeah, go ahead. Artephius.
Yeah, it's 1150. I'm assuming AD is a writer to whom a number of alchemical texts are ascribed.
Oh, he's not way back there. All right. Plotting in his cell, a crazed Artephius. Zappa preserves this vital energy, tends the nerve plants, stores the beauty in canopic urns, defuses the explosives for later use, and watches with mild dismay as fads and bubblegum music crash past his garden gate. He rarely goes out, preferring to stay in and grow the tapes, all at 15 inches per second. Frank Zappa lives in Laurel Canyon, or near it. He has a kitchen filled with blenders, mixers, pulverizers, liquidators, twin garbage disposal. A typical Hollywood home set in the side of the mountain. Though not the last Manchu, Zappa's house functions like a court, 24 hours a day. It has a built-in order centering around Frank and his endless work, and is maintained by Gail, Frank's wife, who smiles her liquid smile and never seems to sleep, and also Janet, whose quizzical air maintains the late-night energy levels. Moon Unit Zappa, Frank's young daughter, hangs out by the pool with Georgie the Alsatian, and Dweedle, he's got the name wrong, Dweedle, it's Dweezil, newborn son, sits in a plastic bucket on the kitchen table watching a miniature TV. The house is filled with people. Herbie Cohen, I guess his manager, Herbie, attempting to demystify a sheet of hieroglyphic figures. Don Vliet, Captain Beefheart, stocking the garden. GTOs arranging songs. So this is in the glorious summer of '69. Roadies receiving mysterious messages from young girls in Montana. Carl, Frank's brother, who does all the things Frank sings about, like work at the car wash. So he's younger than Bobby. Is Frank, and then Bobby, and then Carl. And Carl, I understand, was living with his mother for a long time, or his parents. He didn't get out and get anything going for himself. Don't know where he is today. Some mother maniacs stay around for days. So this would be me. Some mother maniacs stay around for days listening to tapes, and journalists who get caught up in the Zappa time zone, there it is, Zappa time zone, find that a week has gone by and they still haven't interviewed anyone or haven't even seen Frank yet. Look at that. It's a parallel world right there. That's pretty good. Yeah, right. Some mother maniacs stay around for days listening to tapes, and journalists who get caught up in the Zappa time zone find that a week has gone by and they still haven't interviewed anyone and haven't even seen Frank yet. At 5 a.m. in the morning, Gail looks at the dinner in the oven, and Janet is listening to her FM radio in her little house in the garden, the walls covered with photographs. And beneath it all, crouched over his tape machines in the basement like a Ronald Searle English vicar, a black rook peering with sparkling eyes as if the notes would emerge as actual marks on the tape, sits Frank. This is it. This is what I always quote. On the door to the basement is a small black card on which is written in neat white letters, Dr. Zircon's secret lab in Happy Valley. Zircon. Can we hear about Zircon from Ion? Dr. Zircon's secret lab. Now he's saying it's a lab in Happy Valley. The basement is huge, has baby blue carpet and shuttered windows covered by soundproof patterned screens. 2 huge speakers stand 5 feet tall, and between them an assemblage of plastic, wood, and an auto hood covers a hatch through which movies are projected from an antechamber. The carpet is littered with instruments and their cases, and the carpet is littered with instruments and their cases, an antique wheelchair. Now that's before he got injured. An antique wheelchair, life-size dummies, an organ, and further assemblage material. Concert posters and a plaque proclaiming, quote, Zappa's grubby chamber cover the walls. The shutters lock out time as well as sunlight, so the room is still until someone moves or music is played, and time is measured by that. Frank works through the night till about 9 a.m. He has a Scully 282 track and a Teak A1 2000U or 200U connected by a wall-mounted patch board. He also has thousands of tapes, mostly on NAB spools and labeled Merely Entertaining, Soup and Old Clothes No. 1, Rustic Protrusion No. 2, The Mad Gummer No. 2, Cucamonga Era No. 2, Criteria, Right There Bunk, Finale, and so forth. Each one has a carefully indexed content sheet with such entries as, quote, Relaxed Raga Snork Collage with Moody Piano, Very Boss Stereo, slightly deficient in highs. At approximately 135, goes into up-tempo section to 241. How's that for experiencing the opening of, what's the name of the show? Payday. Okay. It's hard.
Where are we?
The tapes are the Zappa Scribble-de-Hobble, or Scribble-de-Bobble. That's a famous book in the James Joyce world. The tapes are the Zappa Scribble-de-Bobble, his musical vocabulary, his archives, sketchbooks, and a constant source of new material as he cuts them up and rearranges them in a new order to create new musical relationships and nuances of rhythm and content. He is a collage artist working with time, manipulating the dynamics of the visual artist with change, texture, and color. Zappa moves attentions, image content, and load by speeding up, splicing, and fading. Are we okay?
Yeah.
At 5:45 a.m., 5:45 a.m., and the basement has early morning quietude before the crickets begin. The large electric clock and speakers give off a low hiss. The dog rustles through the crisp semi-tropical vegetation outside. The coffee percolator gurgles imperceptibly. Frank sits at his desk, black, sugarless coffee, and a cigarette at his elbow, both of which he enjoys intensely. He writes music jerkily, pausing to stare into blank space, then scribbling several bars of quavers. Chord clusters grow and pose difficulties, which after a while cause him to reach for the guitar propped against his chair. The sound is loud, not so much cutting as superimposing on the silence of the room. His Gibson Les Paul, tangled in leads and little petals of discarded paper leader tape like daisies in a summer field. Let's say the sound is loud, not so much cutting as superimposing on the silence of the room. His Gibson Les Paul, tangled in leads and little petals of discarded paper leader tape like daisies in a summer field. So, now it says, Zircon's music. When Frank was young and studying music, he began to read Counterpoint Strict and Free by H.A. Clarke, Philadelphia, 1929. On the second page it said, quote, never write any of the following successions. So it gives the musical staff.
Can you repeat that? Never write what? Sorry.
Never write any of the following successions. and it's it's a note layout. You know, it's what do you call the bars and staff or whatever of written note music?
Well, I suppose you mind the chord progressions.
Yeah, but is it a coda? What's the term for the actual writing it out?
I don't understand what they're
Is it a composition?
Okay, what do you call a composition of music? With
bars on the treble clef?
What do you call it?
Bars on the treble clef?
Yeah, bars on the treble clef. Are you saying bars and or bars
the
on?
The music sheet.
Bars on
music kit.
Bars on
the music
chip.
The partiture.
Okay, Bert, what are you trying to say?
Is it a movement
bars on the treble clef?
What?
Lines and spaces.
Come on, Bert. What's
clef.
the word?
Fugue, canon?
The lines and spaces
on the treble clef.
All right.
Okay. So it says, never write any of the following successions. And then it says, it has a treble clef, and it says numbers 1 and 2 are very harsh. Numbers 3 and 4 are not. Numbers 3 and 4, not so harsh, are of common occurrence in modern usage. So he shows 4 note clusters.
Because he also had his own chord Bible, like his own harmony rules, things he tried and liked, and then he wrote down like his own treaty of what he liked, his own rules.
Yes. Okay, so never write any of the following successions. Numbers 1 and 2 are very harsh. Numbers 3 and 4 not so harsh, and they are of common occurrence in modern usage. So Frank, played these notes and said, "Great," and never read any further. Didn't read this book, Counterpoint, Strict and Free by H.A. Clark.
Just to interject,
it says, and never read any further. What?
In the treble clef, the names of the 4 spaces bottom to top are F, A, C, and E.
Yep. They're in jail now, aren't they? Roxy, are they in jail?
They what?
Are they in jail? Is anybody?
Jail?
Yeah, I don't know. I don't know where I got that idea from.
But they're planning to break out if they are.
Looking at. So Frank played them and said, "Great," and never read any further. These successions are also used very frequently by Igor Stravinsky, who Frank thinks also saw them forbidden in the Counterpoint book. So he didn't read any further because they told him not to do something. So the basic political meaning of schools he confronted. He said, "Bob told me there can be no connection between anything or anybody. And this school here is trying to develop connections. I'm going with Bob."
He should have taken in all their points and contradicted each one.
Yes. He should have, but he didn't. Okay. He says, Barry Miles says, Stravinsky is probably the most obvious classical influence on Frank's work. Where Stravinsky uses a fast piccolo passage in front of a slow orchestral statement of theme, Zappa uses speeded up tape flashing past the drums, bass, and keyboards to the same effect, particularly on Lumpy Gravy. Where Stravinsky suddenly stops the development of an idea with an abrupt drum beat on a bass tom or side tom, Zappa will indicate the same organization of time sections by using a snork or belch. These are not conscious attempts to find present-day equivalents to Stravinsky. They occur as the result of prolonged and attentive listening to the tremendous engineering of Stravinsky's work. In the above cases, the early works such as Firebird Suite and Story of a Soldier. Zappa's music combines the present-time organization of time, which is overlapping time signatures, dynamic flow of color or texture, combines the present-time organization of time, with pastime organizations of time, in brackets nostalgia, refiners to the early days, and that's too